espionage. Thanks to iconic media portrayals such as James Bond, the mere word conjures images of suave agents in tuxedos, high-speed car chases, and bizarre outlandish schemes executed in exotic locales. We might chuckle at the idea of a secret agent donning a jetpack or battling foes with a laser-equipped watch, but it also raises another question. Just how far from reality are these bizarre cinematic spectacles? Well, not actually that far, it turns out, as oftentimes the reality of espionage is only a few short steps removed from these over-the-top media portrayals. It's exactly this kind of outlandish spectacle we're interested in today, but not the kind of high testosterone and high adrenaline spectacle befitting of James Bond. No, that would be too boring. What we're interested in today is the weird, the bizarre, the eyebrow-raising antics that are a bit more befitting of Austin Powers than James Bond. So let's get into it, shall we? Animals are as much a staple of any good spy story as hidden lairs, high-tech gadgets, or mastermind villains. Flick to any random part of a Bond movie, and no doubt you will be no more than a few frames away from seeing some monstrously large dog attempting to chew up the titular hero after his cover is blown, or mere seconds away from sniffing through his disguise as he attempts to sneak through some far-flung national border. This importance translates to the real world too, with dogs being a vital weapon in any intelligence agency or secret police force's arsenal. You likely already knew this, of course, even if you're unfamiliar with espionage. The utility of dogs is pretty blatantly obvious. What may come as a surprise, however, is that cats have also played a role in the world of espionage. And how did they do that? Well, you'd shove microphones in them that employ them as the ultimate hidden microphone. Surely a genius idea if there ever was one, right? Well, as we're about to find out, no, actually, not at all. It's actually a pretty dumb idea. The story began in the 1960s when the CIA, ever after new ideas to help them turn the tide in the Cold War, initiated Operation Acoustic Kitty, a plan to surgically implant cats with microphones in their ear canals and deploy them in the manner that we just described. But a radio set, even one inside of a cat, is more than just a microphone, so they were also fitted with a tiny radio transmitter anchored at the base of their skulls and a small antenna, which was hidden within the cat's fur, supposedly usually on its tail to guarantee the best reception. The finished product was nothing if not an interesting experiment in transhumanism, or should we say transfelanism. It was a cat that functioned both as an organic creature and as a state-of-the-art eavesdropping device. But as with any experimental project, there were hurdles to overcome. While in theory a roving feline spy seemed ingenious, in practice it proved a bit problematic because cats, famously so in fact, do whatever they want, and they don't heed commands. This blatantly obvious epiphany was revealed on one of the first field tests, when a cat tasked with recording a conversation between two individuals seated on a park bench opted to go AWOL rather than stealthily approaching its targets as it had been trained to do. Instead, it went off wandering and was immediately hit by a passing taxi. The tragic incident underscored a critical flaw. While the CIA had effectively modified the cat's physical attributes, they had vastly underestimated the inherent unpredictable nature and instinct of felines. Victor Marchetti, a former assistant to the CIA's director, poignantly remarked on the unfortunate experiment, calling the result a monstrosity. The repercussions of this monumental failure were immediate and unequivocal. The entire project, which had spanned half a decade from conception to execution, had consumed significant resources, and it was brought to an abrupt halt. It wasn't a total failure, however. Despite the myriad challenges and the evident shortcomings, certain aspects of the operation were deemed groundbreaking. Training a cat to carry out specific tasks, even if his commitment to the cause was fleeting, was hailed as a remarkable scientific achievement, just a somewhat pointless achievement that they've yet to find a use for 60 years later. Interestingly, while Operation Acoustic Kitty might have ended in failure, it was not the sole instance of the US government's fascination with integrating animals into intelligence and defense projects. Decades later, in 2006, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA, bankrolled a project that aimed to engineer cyborg insects for potential surveillance roles, eventually unveiling a beetle that could be remotely piloted. Whether these will prove any more useful than the Acoustic Kitties, well, only time will tell. Close your eyes and imagine this scene. It's the height of the Cold War, and deep within the labyrinth of alleyways of East Berlin, a group of hardened Stasi veterans are in hot pursuit of a suspected border jumper. These lads hail from probably the world's most feared secret police force, and not a single mark has been spared on their equipment. You might be surprised then to see what one of the officers has in his hand. it's a glass jar. But what is in this glass jar? We hear you cry. Maybe it's some sort of ether to subdue the suspect. Perhaps some sort of poison to make our hypothetical border jumper never try this again. Well, no, neither it turns out. It actually contains sweat. Human sweat, specifically the suspect's sweat, and soon attack guards will be given a nice big whiff of the jar so they could chase the border jumper down with laser precision. The rationale behind this seemingly bizarre strategy was simple enough: the belief that every individual had a unique aroma akin to a fingerprint that could be catalogued and later identified. By and large, this belief seems to have held true, as by all accounts the method proved to be remarkably effective at tracking people down. The sweat collection was remarkably comprehensive too, with the Stasi having millions of people's sweat tucked away in their archives. At this point, if you are anything like us, you're probably wondering how they even obtained such a vast array of body odors, and, well, that was a process that was equal parts covert and creepy. Citizens, often dissenters or those under suspicion, would be invited for routine chats with officials. Unbeknownst to them, as they sat nervously answering questions, in an unusually hot, sweat-inducing room, a yellow cloth discreetly was placed beneath their seat, and it was collecting their scent. At other times, the Stasi would break into homes, surreptitiously stealing items of clothing, particularly underwear. The dirtier the better, because it had more ingrained odors. The sweat samples had utility beyond just chasing fleeing suspects down too. For example, let's say a poster proclaiming some particularly naughty opinions had just appeared downtown. Well then, let's give it a good old whiff and see if it matches anything in the archive. Sources are unclear on how exactly the scents were matched up, but we can't help but imagine some poor Stasi officer sat at his desk and having a long, hard think about his life choices as he spends an entire shift sniffing sweat samples. However, as low-key hilarious as this barefaced absurdity is, we mustn't forget the immense psychological pressure that such methods exerted on the East German populace. The sheer knowledge that one's personal, intimate scent could be stored in a jar in some cold, distant warehouse, while undoubtedly ridiculous, was ultimately absolutely terrifying and emblematic of the many human rights abuses that were committed in East Germany. The bizarre nature of this surveillance tactic also paints a broader picture of the Stasi's obsession with control. It wasn't enough to simply know where a citizen went or whom they spoke to. The Stasi wanted to catalogue their very essence, to own a part of their identity, the scent jars being a testament to that extreme desire. Today, those very jars can be seen at museums such as the Stasi Museum in Berlin or the Rundeck in Leipzig. Let's bring it back to animals now and take a look at the humble pigeon, an animal that unexpectedly was a reasonably major player in tales of Cold War espionage, and perhaps unsurprisingly proved significantly more useful than the acoustic cat that we talked about at the beginning of today's video. Now, historically, pigeons have been significant in warfare and communication, dating all the way back to ancient times when they served as messengers. Their remarkable homing ability allowed them to return to their base over vast distances, even from unfamiliar territories. This capability was exploited during the World Wars, where they became pivotal in relaying critical information across enemy lines, and as the Cold War set in and satellite imagery was still in its infancy, some bright sparks at the CIA wondered if they might have a new use for the venerable animal, and thus spy pigeons were born. Testing of the spy pigeon concept was conducted all across the US in locations such as Washington, D.C.'s Navy Yards and New York City, and with these tests proving to be a roaring success, the pigeons were soon deployed behind the Iron Curtain, aiming to get a bird's eye view of the Soviets' top-secret military projects. Up until recently, although it was widely known that the CIA employed pigeons, details about how exactly they were used were hard to come by. That changed recently, however, with newly declassified documents revealing a litany of intriguing operations such as Operation Tucana from the 1970s. Here, the CIA trained pigeons to photograph sensitive sites within the Soviet Union. Equipped with specially designed miniature cameras, these birds could capture close-range imagery, producing details far superior to the spy satellites of that time. However, introducing pigeons into Soviet airspace without raising suspicion proved to be a bit of a daunting task. The CIA deliberated on various release methods, even considering the possibility of letting them free from beneath thick coats or from moving vehicles. As for the actual method they employed, well, we don't know. That particular detail appears to have not been released yet. We're eagerly awaiting it. It didn't just stop with pigeons either, as the CIA went on to utilize a wide range of other animals in its espionage antics. Ravens were trained to deposit bugging devices on window ledges using light cues, while dolphins underwent training for underwater operations. There were even trials with remote-controlled dogs and, of course, cats. Yet the ubiquitous pigeon, with its uncanny ability to find its way home from unfamiliar terrains and its presence as a common urban bird, made it a perfect, unsuspecting carrier of information, and it appears to have been the real pièce de résistance of the CIA's animal agents. We say appears intentionally there too, as many details of the Pigeons' missions have yet to be declassified, but still, from what we can ascertain from the documents we do have and the odd passing reference here and there, they really do appear to have been remarkably effective. Today, in a world dominated by electronic surveillance and advanced drones, the tale of Spy Pigeons serves as a poignant reminder of a bygone era of ingenuity and innovation. Our next weird espionage tale has us turning our attention to that consistent thorn in the United States' side for most of the 20th century, Fidel Castro. Safe to say, the CIA weren't exactly fans of Castro and his work, what with the communism and being next door to them and all, and so assassinating him became something of an obsession for the agency, such a deep-rooted and zealous obsession, in fact, that inevitably the plots against him ended up getting just a little bit weird. From exploding cigars to poisonous pens, we really are spoiled for choice here, but to see it at its absolute weirdest, let's have a look at an attempt not to assassinate his person, but to assassinate his character by destroying his trademark beard. Castro's beard wasn't just a signature look, it was a symbol of his revolutionary zeal and virality, a hallmark that enhanced his image both domestically and internationally. Recognizing the beard's emblematic power, it just had to go. It was a simple plan. Strip Castro of his beard, and you effectively strip him of a potent part of his masculine, revolutionary mystique, and soon enough, the little American that dwells deep inside every person on Earth, in the CIA's opinion anyway, would rise to the fore, take command of proceedings, and topple communism in Cuba. Yay! And we're only being marginally hyperbolic here too. Elements of the CIA legitimately believed that destroying Castro's beard would butterfly effect its way to toppling the regime. Now you're probably wondering, how does one go about making a leader's beard fall out? And this is where thallium salt enters the picture, a colorless, tasteless, and highly toxic substance. Infamous for its use in rat poisons and some insecticides, thallium can cause hair loss when ingested or absorbed. The audacious plot was to surreptitiously sprinkle thallium salt onto Castro's shoes while he was on an overseas trip. The assumption was that the poison would be absorbed into Castro's body, leading to the eventual hair loss, not just of his iconic beard, but from his entire body. A beardless and bald Castro, they speculated, would appear weak and be robbed of his charismatic aura. But like a plot twist, straight out of a spy novel, fate intervened. For reasons unrelated to the beard plot, Castro ended up cancelling his overseas trip, unwittingly saving himself from the hairy scheme that the US had in store for him. And so his beard, and thus the whole revolution, was saved. Our final weird tale today is one that you've likely already heard of, as it was so utterly bizarre that it has earned itself a place in the cultural zeitgeist as the go-to example of weird excesses that occur when an intelligence agency is left unchecked to run amok. We speak, of course, of MKUltra. Conceived in the 1950s, a time when fear of communism was rampant in the US and the race for nuclear supremacy was in full swing, the US was not only looking for an edge in weaponry, but also in the realm of the mind. Thus, the CIA initiated Project MKUltra with the goal of developing mind control techniques. Their ambition was as grand as it was eerie: to discover methods for controlling an individual's thoughts, emotions, and decisions. In essence, to turn a person into a programmable entity, the utility of which, in an espionage context, is pretty blatant. Fueling this ambition were stories of the brainwashing of American POWs during the Korean War, odd and bizarre stories that sounded as if they'd been lifted straight from the pages of George Orwell's 1984. Naturally, the CIA, being an organization with a bit of a flimsy grip on morality at the best of times, wanted a piece of this action for itself. To achieve this audacious goal, the CIA embarked on a series of experiments that were the stuff of nightmares. They utilized an assortment of drugs, chiefly LSD, in hopes that it could be used for mind manipulation. Unwitting participants, sometimes innocent American citizens, sometimes prison inmates, were administered these substances without their consent, plunging them into hallucinogenic realms with neither preparation nor support. The stories of these drug trials veer from the comically bizarre, such as operatives dosing each other's morning coffee just to see what would happen, to the deeply tragic, with some subjects suffering lasting mental harm. But the weirdness of MKUltra wasn't confined to drug experiments alone. Delving deep into the annals reveals other unsettling techniques. Electroshocks, hypnosis, and verbal and physical abuse were employed in a desperate bid to rewrite a person's psyche. Some subjects were exposed to repetitive stimuli for extended periods, a method hoped to break them and reprogram them. Others underwent sleep deprivation or were placed in isolation, all in the name of seeing how the human mind could be bent, molded, or shattered. As the 1960s progressed, the secrecy shrouding MKUltra began to fray. Stories of the mysterious government program started to emerge, stoking both public curiosity and outrage. It all came to a head in the 1970s when the project was officially declassified, leading to a series of Senate hearings. The public learned not just of the program's existence, but also of the ethical atrocities committed in its name. And one can't help but wonder, what drove such a program? Well, at the heart of MKUltra was a profound paranoia, an existential fear that the US was trailing in an invisible war of the minds. But more than just geopolitical considerations, MKUltra also bore the hallmark of a time when boundaries in psychology and medicine were being pushed, often recklessly. It was an era when lobotomies were considered a legitimate treatment, and the effects of drugs like LSD were largely uncharted territory. The reverberations of MKUltra are still felt today. In popular culture, the project has been the subject of numerous movies, documentaries, and conspiracy theories. For the victims and their families, the legacy is undeniably more personal and painful, serving as a grim reminder of what can happen when ethical considerations are cast aside in the pursuit of an elusive goal.